In tonight's episode, we're going to be reading a couple of terrifying tales straight from the state of Wyoming. Get ready. Story 1. Oppression of the Supernatural. I would like to start by saying that whether you believe in demons or not, I could say for one that I know they are real and do exist. What I'm about to share with you are real events and not fictional. This is why I mention no names, including the demon's name. I get chills just recounting these encounters. To preface, I'm a 45-year-old gay male. My demonic encounter began when I moved into my first apartment in the summer of 1992. I was 20 at the time. Unfortunately, my demonic encounter lasted for nearly 8 years before I could finally get rid of it, and for good. I will only cover a few of the most terrifying occurrences that happened over that 8-year period. Now, on to my story. I had moved to Casper, Wyoming, a town about 55 miles from where I had graduated high school that year. A friend of mine turned me onto a cute 2-bedroom apartment right on Elm Street. Yes, I did say Elm Street, folks. The apartment was the basement floor of a 2-story house that had been converted into multiple apartments. My friend had recently moved into the main floor apartment and suggested that my boyfriend at the time and I take the bottom unit. It was an ideal situation since we all worked at the same mall at the same time. This was also mid-June, and there was no air conditioning in the apartment at the time, so you can as well imagine it was pretty flippin' hot. I was in the middle of painting the master bedroom when I decided to take a break from the fumes and the heat, heading to the kitchen to get a tall glass of iced tea and have a quick smoke. Now, keep in mind, I was the only one in the apartment at the time as my boyfriend was working. If I recall, it was around 11 p.m. and he was not due home until after 1 in the morning, or right around there. After my smoking had finished, I headed back to the bedroom to finish painting. As I walked back into the room, every hair on my entire body stood on end, and my heart began to beat out of my chest as I realized there was something painted on the opposite wall of where I had been painting. There was no paint spilled on the carpet, and the brush I had been using was right where I had left it. My heart still pounding, I slowly crept up to the wall. The paint was still wet and even slowly dripping down the wall. I read what was painted on the wall. It simply read, "I am here." I bolted out of there and waited outside on the stoop. My boyfriend came home from work. I was not about to go back into that apartment again by myself. My boyfriend, being a huge skeptic, dismissed it all as maybe I had done it myself without remembering, or that the upstairs neighbor had somehow snuck in and painted it, even though they were not home at the time this occurrence had happened. Now, fast forward a few months and we had been gone all day, and it was late when we got home. Having an early day the following day, I headed for the shower while he grabbed himself a beer. As I was showering, I heard the door to the bathroom open and close. I remember thinking to myself, oh, it's probably just my boyfriend. I was in the middle of rinsing the conditioner out of my hair when I heard the shower curtain slide open. "Are you going to join me?" I asked, still rinsing my hair. "Sounds good to me," said a voice that was not my boyfriend's. The voice sounded gravely and low. About that time, I felt these ice-cold hands grab onto my shoulders from behind. I spun around in horror, only to discover I was in the shower alone. I exited the bathroom in such haste, I did not even bother to grab a towel. Heart pounding and dripping wet as I was now in the front room, panting and trying to catch my breath. My boyfriend, shaking uncontrollably and pointing to the bathroom. His eyes were fixed and he appeared to be in a state of shock. His voice quivering, and he whispered, "I saw it go in there." Fast forward 2 years. We had just moved into another basement apartment. This one was on the other side of town. It too was a house that had been transformed into multiple units. The owner of the house and his boyfriend had lived upstairs and were offered a killer deal as far as rent. I think we were paying $200 a month for the 2-bedroom apartment. We'd only lived there about 2 months before the Demonic activity started up yet again. There were old-fashioned swinging doors like you would find in those old Western movies that separated the front room and the kitchen. We had lived in the new place for about 2 months, and there was no supernatural activity of any kind. We were thinking maybe the entity had not followed us to our new home and had begun to truly relax. I and my boyfriend were getting ready to settle down for the night when the saloon doors between the kitchen and the living room began to swing violently back and forth with a vengeance. The nightlights in the kitchen and our bedroom went out, leaving us completely in the dark. "Come play with me," a demonic voice called out to my boyfriend from the kitchen. It was so loud that it echoed through the entire apartment. Still, shrouded in complete darkness, he and I both shook uncontrollably. We began to quietly argue over who was going to make a break for the light switch located on the wall by the door. Not knowing what else to do, I yelled for it to leave in Jesus' name. The entity roared so loudly, I swear you could feel the house shake. We could hear the saloon doors fly open, the night lights come back on, and we were alone again. For how long, we didn't know. It took us about 20 minutes before we could muster up enough courage to move. Needless to say, we did not get any sleep that night and had every light on in the place. Fast forward another couple of weeks. Our company for the evening had just left, and my boyfriend and I had settled into our recliners in the front room, watching a movie and chilling for the remainder of the evening. A loud knock on the front door, signaling one of our friends had probably forgotten their car keys or something, causing my boyfriend to pause the movie and head to the door. He stopped short and shot me a concerned look. Puzzled, I asked him if he was going to get the door or not. He pointed out the motion-censored light was not on. Opening the door, he visibly shivered as there was nobody there and no vehicles in the driveway but our own. As he shut the door, there came a loud crash and the sound of glass breaking from the kitchen. Walking into the kitchen, it took me a minute to figure out what had happened. The coffee pot that was tucked into the corner by the sink was now laying in a zillion pieces under the dining room table. The knocking started up again on the front door. Again, no light to indicate anybody was actually there. Then the knocking switched to the back door. Actually, it was more like pounding. The pounding was hard and loud. I was sure the door was going to cave in. The air became thick and heavy, so much that it was hard to breathe, and that was enough for us that night. And my boyfriend and I bolted out of the house and spent the remainder of the night at a local Denny's restaurant, drinking coffee, too terrified to return to the house until morning daylight. Now, fast forward again another couple of years. By this time, we had found a beautiful 2-story home to rent. We loved it. There was this spiral staircase between the 2 floors. The front door led you to the main floor of the home, where the kitchen, dining room, and living room were. The back door leads you into the basement, where the bedrooms and bathroom were located. It was a nice little house, and we loved it. That is, until the entity found us again. I say this because after each move it seemed it took a while after to either find us or decide to show itself anyway. I would usually dream that I was standing in a large room with doors all around it. In the dream, all the doors would all start slamming shut, one at a time, and as I ran from door to door, trying to escape, as the last one would slam shut, the room would fill with demonic laughter, which is how I knew it had found us again. The night after having this dream, my husband and I were downstairs in our bedroom, putting our laundry away, when we heard my mother hollering down to us from the top of the stairs for us to come up and visit with her. We shot one another a confused look. My mother lived about 55 miles away, never came over without calling first. That and both the front and back doors were locked. Thinking maybe my mother had made a copy of our house key, and of course, not wanting to be rude, I headed up the stairs, with my boyfriend hot on my heels. As I approached the top of the stairs, I could see the front door was still locked and no sign of my mother anywhere. The temperature in the living room had dropped drastically, causing me to shiver. As I moved into the living room, my boyfriend walked to the front door, opening it, and confirmed that no car in the driveway. That is when we both saw a large black mass make its way slowly across the wall from the kitchen into the dining room. Its slow movement appeared to be deliberate, as if it wanted us to see it. As it moved through the dining room into the front room, my mother's picture flew off the wall past me and went straight down into the basement. As the years progressed, so did the entity's activities. It had gotten so bad that even our friends and family refused to come over. They too would see the black mass, witness things moving on their own, and would hear disembodied voices calling their names. One morning, I had just arrived home from a 13-hour night shift. I was tired. I settled on the couch to watch some television before heading to bed. Out of nowhere, there was a huge boom. It sounded like a bomb had gone off. The whole house, and I do mean the whole house, began to shake violently. It only lasted about 10 or so seconds. I'm not sure because it felt much longer than that. I quickly ran outdoors, thinking maybe a gas main in the neighborhood had exploded, or maybe we had an earthquake. All was still calm, and still. No one else seemed to be even aware that something major had happened. As I was on the phone with the PD, reporting what had just happened, my boyfriend and my brother, who had stayed the night in our guest room, came tearing upstairs in panic. Their faces were pale white, and you could see how just truly terrified they were. The police assured me that nobody else had reported anything, that maybe it was just my house settling. My brother said the house shook so violently, it shook him right out of the bed onto the floor. I knew that then it was the demon. It was trying to rid ourselves of it once and for all. I had several ministers, priests, and mediums come to my house. The mediums were at least more helpful. The religious men were too afraid to do anything at all, and simply said prayer and left. I finally found a minister who specialized in deliverance ministry. She was well versed in dealing with demonic activity and getting rid of it. She was also able to ascertain the demon's name, which gave her power over it, or Jesus. She told me it was not her exorcising the demon, but rather the power and the blood of Jesus. I also learned that the demon was not actually attached to me, but rather my boyfriend. I learned the reason it always took the demon a while to show back up was the cleansing rituals I had been doing were working, to a point, but that my boyfriend was the one that kept opening up the door, so to speak, for it to return. I was not aware of it at the time, but he had not only been dabbling with witchcraft, but was meeting strangers in the graveyard for sex, since the cops heavily patrolled the city parks. There were once a hot spot for random hookups and drug use. Needless to say, I was able to finally rid myself of the demon and him. Unfortunately for him, the demon followed him and his life quickly fell apart. He got into drugs, alcohol, and worse. He passed away last year unexpectedly. We remained friends over the years, and we would talk on the phone or text. I spoke to him a week before his death. He had told me he was still being tormented by the demon. I have no idea what actually happened to my ex. It has all been kind of kept hush-hush. I pray that he is at peace now. Story 2. Not a cop. Me and my friends are grunge freaks. We began out on Nirvana and Soundgarden, eventually discovering more obscure bands like Mudhoney, the Melvins, and the Screaming Trees. Anyone who knows anything about grunge will tell you that it all began in Seattle, how this spontaneous new genre sprang out of the ashes of post-punk to take the world by storm. And it all happened within a few square miles, so naturally, Seattle is like a mecca for grunge fans. And after years of planning and false commitment, we finally got our crap together and went on a road trip to our sacred city. That's how we ended up on the Wyoming interstate. So, we're just driving along, singing along to an Alice in Chains song, when the next thing I know, I see red and blue flashes in my rear view. My buddy's in the back seat, spins around, seeing the same thing I did. An unmarked vehicle with one of those attachable emergency lights on top. As I begin to pull over, I'm wondering, where in the hell is this cop car from? We were on this long stretch of open road and could see for miles around us. It was pretty unnerving that it had just managed to just creep up on us like that, but you know how it is. Traffic cops tend to stay out of sight in little rest areas or whatever. Their speedometers at the ready. Now, I was well within the speed limit, but I was still worried. I'd be lying if I said we didn't have anything on us that we shouldn't have, but That was all buried in our bags in the trunk, and even then it wasn't exactly enough to charge us with. So I just got my driver's license ready on my lap, kept my hands at 10 and 2, like a good little citizen. The cop turns off his lights and then gets out of the unmarked car, walking along the dusty roadside towards us. He's wearing civilian clothing, a baseball cap, aviator sunglasses, and a checkered shirt, but I can clearly see the utility belt and the badge he's wearing. When he knocks on my window, I promptly roll it down, smiling, while I give him my cheeriest, "Good afternoon, officer." I'm no bootlicker, but I was not about to let this guy ruin our road trip. What follows probably isn't exactly what was said that day, but it's the best I can remember. "Afternoon, officer. How can I help you?" "Driver's license and registration," he just demanded. I take one hand off the steering wheel and hand him my license. He takes a long, careful look, first at my license and then at me. "Detroit, huh?" he finally said dismissively. "You're a long way from home, son. What's your business here in Wyoming?" "We're actually on a road trip, sir. Headed out towards Washington, Seattle to be specific." "What for?" Just because, I guess. Always wanted to see the West Coast." "Just because, huh?" The cop mockingly interjected, "Maybe. See some of California." My words broke off. I really didn't like where the whole thing was going. "Any weapons in the car?" "No, sir." "Drugs or alcohol?" "No, sir." I replied without hesitation, but the answer didn't seem to satisfy him. I could feel his steely gaze from behind his mirrored glasses. They made him seem like more of a machine than a man. "I'm gonna need y'all to step out of the vehicle." His voice was cold. "What for?" "Don't make me tell you again." I turned to my buddies in the back seat, and they looked as worried as I had felt. Slowly, we did as we were told and got out of the car, walking over to the side of the road and grouping together near the verge. It was then that I actually got a good look at the unmarked car the cop was driving. It was an old Dodge pickup. I mean, really old. It looked like it might fall apart if the thing drove faster than 40. "Something interest you about my vehicle, son?" No, sir," I lied, thinking that their department must have been seriously underfunded. Then eyes front. One of my buddies shot me a look, as if to say, "What is this guy's deal?" But I shook my head, figuring if we just played along, we'd be out of there faster. "I'm gonna need to see the passenger's IDs," the cop said suddenly. "Mine's in the car," one friend said, and the other said the same. "You didn't take your IDs out to show a cop at a traffic stop? Are you mentally disabled?" No." "Then go get him. Pair you." Cue more nervous looks amongst us before they start wandering back to their car to get their IDs. Then, to my complete and utter shock, the cop takes his revolver out of his hip holster, flicks off the safety, and points it towards my buddies. One of my friends turns, looks down the barrel of the revolver, and freezes in place, pure fear in his eyes. "I'm not going to shoot you, but I need to cover my butt, just in case you pull a pistol out of that back seat," the cop said with a grin. "Now, go on. Go get him." It was about this point that I decided to make a formal complaint against the officer. I was scared, sure, but I was really pissed off too. Whatever backwater county this was, their volunteer sheriff program obviously needed some thorough vetting. I don't know how much good it'd do, but I had to do something. This person had to pay. After he gets my buddy's ID, he takes them back to his truck and starts writing stuff down on a notepad. Obviously, all of our personal information. Then he starts talking to somebody, but not on a radio, as you'd expect. All he had was a cell phone in hand. When he finishes, he gets out, then doesn't even walk all the way over to us before just tossing our IDs in the dirt. "Get out of Wyoming," he spat, before getting back into his truck and speeding off into the distance, leaving us choking on a cloud of dirt. Once he's out of sight, we start cursing him out, raging about how we're going to make a formal complaint once we're back home. So, cut to about an hour later, and we're only about 50 miles further into our journey, when another set of red and blue lights appear in our rearview mirror. We just straight up panic at this point and actually debate whether or not to just try to outrun this psycho, since there's no way his old truck could keep up. But once we work out that it's an actual marked unit this time, and evidently not the same person, we pull over and repeat the entire process. Only it doesn't quite go the same way. I'll tell you what you need to know. At some point, I mentioned to this uniformed cop that I've already been stopped, like just an hour before. He looks confused and asks where we'd been pulled over. I didn't know any places by name or heart, but I insisted it was less than 100 miles back the way we came. When the uniformed cop tells me that that is impossible, it takes all my will to not ask the guy if all Wyoming cops are as incompetent as this. But then he finishes his sentence. I'm the only highway patrol in the county right now. If I wasn't me who pulled you over, I really don't know who did. We described the guy who pulled us over to the uniformed cop, told him the vehicle type, even the color of this person's mustache. But the cop had no clue who we were talking about. And then it hit us. The guy wasn't highway patrol. He wasn't even a volunteer deputy. To this very day, we have no idea who it was that pulled us over on that stretch of interstate. Our complaints to the state police went nowhere, and as far as I know, they never found the guy to charge him with impersonating an officer. The lesson being, even though it might piss them off, always ask for ID from cops who pull you over, and be sure to take a good look at them. There are some real psychos out there. If you guys enjoyed tonight's stories, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and stay tuned for the very next episode.